Greetings friends, my name is Vava Stelmach and now we'll dive in the top news of this day. On the morning of July 17th, there was a report of a fall of structures on a bridge across the Kerch Strait. The real reasons behind another incident on the so-called Crimean Bridge are still unknown. The explanations of the occupation administration and the leadership of the aggressor state are unworthy of trust. The bridge across the Kerch Strait is an illegally built structure that is subject to dismantling. Entry into the temporarily occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea through this object is illegal too. Since the beginning of construction, there were serious reservations about the quality and safety of the structure. It is now clear that the bridge across the Kerch Strait is a chronically emergency object, which is dangerous to use. Russia is unable to ensure the safety of movement and stay in the temporarily occupied Crimea. Until the time of liberation, non-residents are advised to refrain from visits of Crimea. Moreover, the Russians now accuse the Ukrainians of having killed civilians during the collapse of the Kerch Bridge. You know, it is a common practice for the Kremlin to cover objects used for military purposes by civilians and then tell everybody that Ukrainians are terrorists. But everything happens exactly the opposite. The Russians hit civilian objects and then call them military. And this is terrorism indeed. The incident on the bridge across the Kerch Strait is likely to be used by the Kremlin for new unfounded accusations and gestures aimed at escalating and violating international agreements. The grain deal has gone down in history, said today President of Turkey Recep Erdogan. Erdogan's remarks came after the Kremlin said that the grain deal had de facto ended hours before it was due to expire and that Moscow would return to the landmark agreement if the conditions were met. The deal brokered by the United Nations and Turkey last July aimed to alleviate a global food crisis by allowing Ukrainian grain blocked by Russia's invasion to be exported safely. Moscow has threatened to leave the deal for weeks, saying its side of the agreement was not properly implemented. I believe Russian President Putin wants continuation of Black Sea grain deal, Erdogan told reporters ahead of his departure for Saudi Arabia. He added that he would hold talks with Putin and that Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan would also discuss the matter with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The next term of the grain deal expired today. We are open to the extension of the grain deal, which solves global problems of food security. The possible withdrawal of Russia from the grain deal will mean neglecting its interests of countries, in particular Africa, which expect to receive the necessary food at affordable prices.
Let's be clear, this Black Sea grain deal agreed under the auspices of Antonio Guterres is very important, especially for the most vulnerable countries, because this agreement, together with the European solidarity lanes, it is helping to make sure that the most vulnerable countries have access to the grains and to the fertilizers they need for the people, for the population. And that's why we fully support all the efforts of Antonio Guterres to make sure that the continuity of this agreement will be guaranteed.
Moscow is looking for reasons to raise the stakes in blackmail by disrupting the grain initiative. A mysterious incident on the Kerch Bridge could be such an occasion. At the same time, Russia itself threatens the security of the grain corridor by attacking the port infrastructure of Odessa and Snake Island. I will remind you that a year ago, through the mediation of Turkey and the UN, a grain agreement was concluded. It unblocked exports through Ukrainian ports, including food supplies, to starving countries. Russia constantly threatened to withdraw from the grain agreement, but extended it several times. The last agreement was extended on May 17th for 2 months. At the same time, the Russian Federation stated it would not agree to continue the agreements after July 17th without fulfilling a number of conditions, connecting Rossельhozbank to SWIFT, resuming the operation of the Taliati-Odessa ammonia pipeline, unfreezing the assets of Russian companies, unblocking transport logistics and the supply of spare parts. On July 16th, the last vessel under the agreement left the Ukrainian port. In the event of Russia's withdrawal from the deal, Ukraine, together with partners, is preparing to implement alternative options and routes for food exports. On July 17, 2014, Russian terrorists shot down a passenger Boeing 777 of Malaysian Airlines, which was operating a regular flight MH17. 298 people died. The downing of the Malaysian Airlines passenger liner is a consequence of the hybrid war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine back in 2014. The MH17 case is the most documented and investigated Russian war crime. As a result of a thorough several-year investigation, it was possible to clearly establish the murder weapon, the Russian Buk air defense system, and the main perpetrators: Igor Girkin, Sergei Dubinsky, Leonid Kharchenko. Throughout the investigation, Russia purposefully produced fakes at the highest state level to divert suspicions from itself and shift the blame to Ukraine. Lies are a characteristic feature of the Russians, accompanying all their crimes. And in my opinion, this incident became one of the reasons for further war crimes by the Russians, because the world did not react quickly and effectively to this one. Over the years, we have listened to dozens of different versions. We have heard about the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian DRG, and about the planes that the passengers allegedly saw in portholes before the disaster. But in the end, all these theories of the Kremlin turned out to be lies. How unexpected. However, today is not the time for accusations, but for honoring the memory of innocent victims.
9 years ago, the crash resulted in the tragic death of 298 people, including 80 children. We express our deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of all the passengers and crew members on board. The downing of flight MH17 is one of the most howling pages of the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, and made it clear that the actions of the aggressor state have consequences for the entire world community. Ukraine will continue to make all possible efforts to establish justice for the victims of the tragedy, hold Russia and all guilty accountable, and have guarantees of non-repetition of such tragic incident. Statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine on the anniversary of the downing of flight MH17.
The Boeing 777 crash is just one of the huge number of Russian crimes committed in Ukraine. All of them must be investigated, and the perpetrators will be identified. We welcome the decision by the District Court of The Hague, which found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment 3 people responsible for shooting down flight MH17. We also welcome the decisions of the Council of the International Civil Aviation Organization and the European Court of Human Rights, which found its jurisdiction to consider disputes regarding Russia's violation of its international legal obligations. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay updated. Subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is that really matters. Goodbye.